Okay, Brandy, I think I am going to turn it over to you. Brandy Secchi is our presenter for today, and I will let her introduce herself.
All right, thank you very much, Amber, for that. I am Brandy Secchi, mental health practitioner. I have been in practice in some shape or form for 20 years, working in agencies, large and small, also private practice, and more recently as a mental health provider in the school at Laurel Concord College Schools. So I appreciate this opportunity to do a quick intro to mental health. It was titled Mental Health 101. Because we want to keep it pretty basic, as we know that many of these subjects can definitely expand upon, but we wanted to start here with this today. So I just appreciate the opportunity from the Project Awareness Grant and the Department of Education for reaching out for me to be able to do this. I believe for many years that mental health would become a greater priority for all of us, and I think slowly it's getting there. And it just goes to show when the schools are starting to notice and make this a priority for our state and for our students. So with that, we'll get started. As Amber said, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. They're going to be managing that for me until the end. And if there's something that should come up during that you would rather ask privately, please feel free to do so. You'll see my email there is brandy.secchi@lccschool.org. I would be more than happy to answer questions or get back to you as soon as I can with that as well. So we are going to get started talking about today's objectives. Uh-oh. Let's see, there we go. We're going to talk about the prevalence of mental health today. The main goal is to talk about the interrelationship of our mental health state. You'll see that threaded through our entire workshop today. We will discuss signs and symptoms of the most common mental health concerns, and hopefully increase an understanding of the stress response and how to build resilience and support others, as well as we will have local and statewide resources available at the end of the training as well. So we're going to start out with the importance of mental health. Why is it important? I just wanted to show a quote from the Surgeon General from 1999. And I'm going to read it out loud to you, and I want you to think about it for a minute and let it roll over to you in your own minds. Mental health is a state of successful performance of mental function, resulting in productive activities, fulfilling relationships with people, and the ability to change and cope with adversity and stress. As you think about our own state in the last few years with floods and COVID and our own family stressors and adversities that we are going through each day and each year, we really have to think about how have we been doing. And I think that's why we are now starting to see more attention brought to our mental health. And I think there's no time like the present to educate yourselves a little bit more about what you can do and just knowing the ins and outs of mental health. So today I'm going to start with a 3-minute video that just goes over a little bit about mental health, and there's something I'll have you kind of roll around to at the end. So here is that. Let's see if I can get this going.
Why did I do that? Why are they looking at me? Why am I so weird?
Don't eat that. You can't eat that. Just a few more pounds. This isn't real. It's all in your head. You're imagining things.
Why am I so
Pay
weird?
attention.
Why
Pay
did I do
attention.
that? Why are they
Listen.
looking at me?
Fix
Why
it.
am I
It's
so
not right.
weird?
Fix
Why
it.
did I do
You
that?
need to
Why
fix
are they
it.
looking at
It's
me?
not
Why am I
right.
just imagining?
Straighten it out.
Why did I do
This
that?
isn't real.
Pay
It's all in your head.
attention.
Straighten it out. This isn't real. It's all in your head. Pay attention. Straighten it. It's all in your head. There is something wrong with you.
in 5 Americans have a diagnosable mental illness. Stigma will keep most from treatment. For more information on mental health, visit mentalhealthamerica.net.
Okay. A short video, you might be wondering why I show this, but I show this because mental health is confusing, very complex, and difficult to understand. But regardless of diagnosis and symptoms, the bottom line is that we're all human. And so we have to let that roll around in our own minds a little bit, because we have language that can help the stigma. As you might have heard, the last line in that video was, stigma prevents people from seeking treatment. And I think that's where we've been in the past for mental health. And we're slowly breaking that down to get an understanding that it's okay to not be okay. And the bottom line is that we are all human. So I want you to think for a minute and ask yourself, what kind of language do I currently use that may increase negative stigma regarding mental health? Just take a second as you think about that. And I don't say that to feel guilty. I just say that because awareness is where it changes. And you'll hear me talk a lot about self-awareness today and throughout this program. So just a question to ask yourself, what sort of language am I currently using that may increase negative stigma regarding mental health? So just think about that for a second. Okay. Yeah, we're going to have an opportunity here in a second to chat, or if you feel comfortable, you may get yourself off mute and chat for a minute. I have another question for you. What do you think are some of the most significant things impacting individuals' mental health today? Please either type in the chat box, or if you would like to unmute and share, that would be great as well. We're just going to take a few minutes here. I'm seeing a lot of social media, pandemic, stress, socio and economic status and stigmas, isolation from human interaction. Yeah. Substance abuse. There's another one I've seen. Unrealistic expectations. Doesn't that sort of come through with our social media? Overwhelming expectations, not being with other people. Yeah. Identity, that confusion sometimes, and worrying about the future. Yeah. So, as we write on these, it's so interesting. A lot of people are on the same boat, and I would agree. I don't think there's any wrong answers there to be, thought of. All of them are great. And you have to wonder how much has life changed, even from when we were younger, if you think about it. Social media has brought on a whole nother level of expectations for ourselves, or what we think could be. And I think just having some self-awareness, as I said, I would be bringing up a lot. It's just that we're having these conversations, that we're able to discuss it and notice them and identify them as stressors. So whether you're in a school setting and you're working with our youth, or you're a parent and you have your own kids, it's always towing on the back of our minds, like what is the aftermath of some of these things. And our minds keep changing, and our society keeps changing, and mental health is changing. And I think that's why we're seeing it increase as to our awareness and the importance of that. So I appreciate all that we're willing to share. I think you're all on target, and that's what's going to kind of bring us through some of the rest of this presentation today. I think that I'm grateful that we're able to talk about it and to have discussions, and that's how we change the stigma. Getting to know what clicks for people is helpful, and how we can support our youth with those stressors. And we'll talk a little bit later and throughout about the importance of environment and genetics on mental health. It's really no different than our physical health, and more information and knowledge is coming out about that. So we'll continue to share those things as we go along here today. But thank you for sharing. We all have important roles, like I said, with our youth and with ourselves, and it all starts with self-awareness. So I think just showing up for today is a good start in the right direction, because I know we all come with our different spots and what we know about mental health. So I appreciate you sharing. So just increasing our knowledge and getting to know more about the prevalence of our mental health today. Did you know 1 in 4 to 5 youth live with a mental health condition? So if you think about your lunch tables at school, think about that. How many are sitting at each table? At least one of those youth will likely have a mental health condition through their lifespan. 10% with a behavior or conduct disorder. Those are the ones we typically can see with our own eyes, a lot of times just looking at their behavior. 11% with a mood disorder, such as depression. 8% with an anxiety disorder. And half of all lifetime cases of mental health conditions begin by age 14 and 75% by age 24. I wanted to talk just briefly at that point right there about the ages that you look there, beginning at age 14 to 24. That's considered adolescence. And what we know about brain development, and I will just touch on it briefly, but that's a whole nother training is your brain development. But if we think about adolescents' brains, it's definitely worth noting, our brains continue to develop. And during adolescence, it's sometimes the most plastic time when our brains are building and changing and growing. And due to the social, emotional, and physical growing that brains do, especially during adolescence, that's when we notice that those mental health illnesses start to emerge. So again, as we'll talk about later on more so, is our genetics and our environment have a little bit or a lot to do with that. Moving on then, suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 to 34-year-olds. And 1 of 5 9th through 12th graders reported that they had seriously considered suicide within the past year. I believe the pandemic and mental health, as we know, our entire world kind of got flipped upside down, and we changed the way we lived. We changed how we did school, how we did our jobs, and still kind of a lot of questions are what's going to become of this. Some of the things I noticed going back to school last year was students' anxiety really increased as they became back to school. And some of the conversations were around, students just kind of forgot how to, as the younger ones, how to share and how to play at recess with one another. Just those simple social skills that we kind of take for granted in learning in school. They kind of forgot because they had some time off there. As we all know, we have some adaptations to work toward when we have major changes like that. And that was definitely the pandemic, a major change that we all went through, kind of wondering when the next shoe was going to drop. Some of us were kind of living in that, well, we're safe so far, and what's it going to look like next week? We weren't really sure. And so when you take that away from students, especially younger ones, it's difficult to feel comfortable in your environment. So that definitely causes stress. But younger adults are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety and or depressive disorder during that COVID-19 pandemic. And I think, as we talked about earlier with that adolescent's brain and that ages of 18 to 24%, they haven't necessarily gained those coping skills yet to get through some of those stressful times. So you see that as the major age group. So I think of some of those kids that graduated last year, excited for college, and then living at home and doing online. Wow, that's not how it was supposed to be. So just a lot of adapting to the uncertainty. So the next slide, we're going to look at this diagram or triangle, pyramid, however you want to use it. And we're going to use the example of depression as we look into the interrelationship of mental health states. This slide or this triangle is going to be the basis of our training today to demonstrate the differentiating states of mental health that we all fall into. So you can move in and out of these states, especially the blue, the green, and the yellow. So if you notice on the blue, no distress, problem, or disorder, it's just sometimes thoughtful. You're coping with things pretty well. Life is good. You're in that blue area. Mental distress is something that we all certainly feel from now and then: upset, annoyed, sad, unhappy, disappointed, rejected, despondent, pessimistic. This is where you may notice some of those genetics kind of making a play, where that's part of their personality. They might be more keyed up or stressed at some points, but that's kind of where that lays, that mental distress. As we move up to the yellow, we see more mental health problems: heartbroken, sorrowful, more grieving or mournful, despairing. With our mental health problems, people are faced with larger stressors. Everyone experiences some strong negative emotions during a mental health problem. Necessarily, it might be accompanied by more difficulties with their thinking or their cognitive, like they might say, or you might hear them say, nothing will ever be the same. My life is completely different now. That might be the cognitions or the thought process of someone with a mental health problem. They're physical. They might say, man, I'm having a hard time sleeping, or I just don't have the energy anymore. Or they might have a lot of physical or somatic complaints, headaches and pains. You might see that. Also, behavior changes. They might be more socially withdrawn. They might avoid their usual activities that they enjoy, or have much more irritability or anger outbursts with that mental health problem. Those happen a lot of times to all of us. The mental disorder or illness is where that depression lays, or that diagnosis. And that's different than your mental health problem. It's very increasing. And we'll go through this here in a little bit more length as we go through, but just kind of an identified triangle as our basis of our training today. But again, we can move in and out from level to level. So looking at mental health, the overall umbrella of our talk today, a state of well-being that means having the capacity to be successfully adapting to the challenges that life creates for people. Negative emotions are actually a part of good health. Crying, feeling sad, getting annoyed or angry. Those are all normal responses to life challenges. They're uncomfortable, yes, but they are certainly some things that we all go through. So that's something that we want to remember in our language when we're talking with young adults, or just even young youth, getting them able to identify, oh, you look really sad today. Just giving them that language can be super helpful. Being stressed does not mean that we don't have good mental health. Again, that's just part of life. However, I think the key is being able to identify the stress and learning how to overcome it in a way that solves the problem causing it in good mental health. So know how to problem solve and how to cope. And we'll get into that as we move up our triangle today. Finding balance. This is, I call it the wellness 8, the big 8. You could probably eliminate a few of them if you'd wanted to. This is probably my favorite topic to talk about because it's hopeful. right? If we are looking at our most well-being or our greatest wellness, you're looking at these states. What do I look like? How do I feel? And what am I doing when I'm feeling at my optimal best? You can divide those things or those coping skills into these 8 dimensions: emotional, spiritual, intellectual, physical, environmental, financial, occupational, and social. Obviously, the occupational would be school for students, right? And financial, those hopefully they don't have a whole lot of say so in their finances at young ages. So some of those, like I said, are just based on age appropriateness for which one, but you can get an idea of that. When I have students looking for coping skills that work for them, this is where I start. What is something that you can do that helps you feel good? And one of the easier ones for kiddos and all of us really is to think of as physical. We have learned about our physical taking care of ourselves for a whole lot longer than our mental health or emotional health. So someone might say physical health would be just getting good rest, making sure that I am eating pretty healthy or getting plenty of fluids, taking medications as needed, getting exercise, right? That's been hammered down to us for quite a while. Emotional just goes back to that, expressing yourself, even if it means crying or communicating with someone socially, sharing yourself with someone or having that connected person to check in with you. Is that social and emotional? It goes together. When I do the wellness training, I like to interlock all the circles, because if you can increase 2 of those circles, more than likely they will all be connected. One of the examples I like to share with my students and just other people is I'm a runner. So I physically like to go run. I started running as a mental health practitioner as a way to cope with my own, just at the end of the day, I needed something to bring me down and let my mind go. And so that physical run actually turned more into an emotional release for me. Later on, more social as I learn other runners and races, and it even becomes spiritual for me as I look at the sunset or just notice the things around me when I'm running outside. So it really does inspire me in other areas. And that's just an example. Each person's would look completely different, and there is no wrong way. I think that's the key, is finding what works for you. And that's part of that self-awareness that can help us stay mentally well. So moving up our triangle is that mental distress, the inner signal of anxiety or stress that a person has when something in their environment is demanding that they adapt to change. So that inner signal could be identified as butterflies, headaches, stomach aches, right? It's just uncomfortable. Maybe when you're getting up for a speech engagement, like myself, kind of felt butterflies today. But it's a learning process of how to manage that stress and use that signal to develop the new coping skills. This is a game changer. When you're able to take that stress and learn what works for you and find that balance, that is how we can stay more proactive in our mental health wellness. So at the bottom line, it is a part of good mental health to acknowledge stress and try to solve the challenge using strategies successfully. This process is called adaptation or resilience building. And we'll talk more about that as we go as well. My next slide is probably one of my favorites. I know it's sort of small, but I want you to notice on the left column with the stressor and the arrows, it's kind of like our map, okay? And on the right side with the numbers, it's our key. So if we look down, we see 1 is our stressor. A challenge occurs in our environment. Might be an upcoming exam, for an example. Our stress response, or what our body experiences, heart racing, rapid breathing, tension, etc. It's different for everyone. And our brains automatically have a cognitive assessment, right? We can understand that this experience is signaling us that we have a problem to solve, okay? The positive side of that is 3, There is a challenge I need to face, and I have the courage getting ready to deal with it. In that same notation, the negative side of that is I can't do this. I'm overwhelmed. I'm stressed out, or I'm worried. Here in this section, this is what I would tell my students as the positive side would be listening to your inner cheerleader, where the negative is that stinking thinking. And I want kids to be able to identify their own thinking, because this is where it can be a game changer for them or for ourselves. When you start to notice your own thoughts, you're gaining your self-awareness. And if it's negative, you have to challenge, is this real, or is this my own stinking thinking getting in the way? Because 5 and 6, if you look at positively, I got this, I know I can do this, I have a problem to solve, and I know the strategies I can use to challenge it. Then you're learning new skills and adapting to your stress response. However, if you let stinking thinking in your negative number 4, it leads you down to avoiding the challenge or focus on decreasing the stress response only. So we retreat, we avoid the place, focus on applying interventions designed to evaluate intensity of the stress response. Some people, if they use that negative coping skill of eating or using substances, this is where that can happen. Like, oh, I can't handle this anymore, I'm going to go to this. And they may not learn new skills to adapt. Furthermore, stressor response, we're continuing to go down. On the left side, again, just as a reminder, is the positive side. So we consider it as a positive signal used to alert to solve the problem and focus on developing the strategies to solve the problem. Plus, use the positive stress reduction techniques. This might be where I take a deep breath, tell myself, I got to listen to my inner cheerleader here. I got this. I'm okay. New skills learned. Again, you're building resilience. Right there, you're kind of conquering that stress in a positive way. You're building your own resilience to stress. On the other side of that, as we remember our stinking thinking on the right side, we consider it as a negative signal to either be avoided or only to focus on decreasing the intensity. I can't handle this anymore. I'm going to do this. There's no new skills learned, but we create a dependency on that negative coping skill and that thought process of, I can't do it. So that's kind of how our brains work, and that cognitive way that our behaviors are learned. So it's really important kind of just to be aware of that self-awareness. So I want you to think for a minute again, what are some ways you deal with stress in a healthy way? You can unmute, or you can feel free to put them in the chat box as well. But what are some ways you deal with it? I eat a piece of chocolate. Yep. All in moderation, right? Reading a book, walking, deep breathing, listening to music, 8 hours of sleep every night. Play the piano. Deep breathing. Walk, read, listen to music, talk it out, go for a walk, exercise. Meditation, cook, read, lifting weights, brain dump. Yeah, talk to a friend. Okay, I like what I'm seeing here. And when you look at the chat box, you can almost go back to that 8 dimensions of wellness and find out where those things are. Now, some things have several all at once. Shut the world out and get alone with God. There's your spiritual, right? Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, great ideas, right? And each one of those things would fit into that 8 dimensions of wellness. So if there was ever a time when you wanted to look at what are my coping skills, fit those into that dimensions of wellness. But those things that you're adding is absolutely correct. I have a kiddo that retreats to gain what they need after maybe a lot of social time. And I know that about my own kiddo, right? The other kid does not need that, needs more physical exercise. So we all need something different, and we have to figure that out. That's a part of growing and knowing more about what is it that we need to help us feel our optimal best wellness. And it looks different for everybody, and there's not a wrong way, but just to be aware of it. What is it? Another thing about this stress response and how you can help kids is as a teacher or even as a parent, a stressful situation that you could be in. Let's just say, for example, oh, I can't get this technology to work in my classroom or even at home. And I could go, oh, this is so stupid. I never know anything how to do this computer stuff. If I just didn't have to do it, and then go and do whatever negative coping silly that you can leave to your imagination. Or I could use it as a learning tool in my classroom or at home with my kids and say, I need a deep breath here for a second. This is really stressing me out. I feel my heart really beating quickly because I can't get this whiteboard to work today. So let me take a minute. What are some things I can do that might be able to help me through this? And if you're in a classroom setting, they will tell you. They'll give, hey, we need to go find Mr. So-and-so, or, oh, Mrs. So-and-so knows how to do this, or I can do it. I learned how. And it teaches them and it models for them how to problem solve to get through that stressful situation. But to give them the language, very helpful. I feel stressed out. I can't get this. What is something I could do? Let me take a deep breath for a minute. I feel like my stomach's just got a pit. Using that language and saying it out loud gives them the opportunity to practice that skill. So you're probably already doing those things, which is exactly what you should be doing. And if not, there's a new skill that can help the youth get through some of those stress responses too. Whoops, let me go back. Moving up our triangle, we're going to move up to mental health problems. So we are, hang on, I'm getting lost here. There we go. Just needed to find my notes. Mental health problem. Mental health problems arise when a person is faced with a much larger stressor than usual. And these do occur as a part of normal life and are not a mental illness. Okay. So it's a death of a loved one, or moving to a new country, or serious physical illness, or job loss out of nowhere, or those kinds of things that can be really challenging at a time of stress. So everyone experiences these strong negatives, emotions at times of mental health problems, right? So there's that sadness, grief, anger. Those are the emotions. If you're thinking about the cognitive or the thought process during mental health problems, it may sound like this. Oh, nothing will ever be the same. How will I ever get through this? They're physical. You might notice sleep problems, loss of energy, or more occurring aches and pains that weren't usually there. Behavioral, you might see a social withdrawal, but you have to notice, is this a social withdrawal because of the mental health stressor that's in their life? Or is this them retreating because this is how they fill their bucket, right? So you have to know your person or know yourself and ask the questions. This is sometimes where we have to get more comfortable asking uncomfortable questions with the people that we're filling in or checking in on. Even ourselves, sometimes we have to challenge ourselves with those kinds of questions. But the behavioral, you might see, like I said, that social withdrawal and whatnot. So that is the mental health problems that you see when something's just maybe not right. Mental health problems. You notice you or someone else just doesn't seem right. You've noticed changed behavior, or always putting them or yourself down in your thinking. I'm just not good enough. Nothing really matters anyway. Might be some of their cognitions or your own if this is you. But the key here is getting help early. Chances are that there's not a serious problem, and reassurance and support may be all that is needed. So that's something to think about too when you're working with youth. You know, just checking in with that person can make all the difference in the world. I know last year I had a few teachers that wanted me to build them a check-in with their students, and the teachers that did do that usually kept me in the loop with emails, like, hey, can you check in? And I challenged them to check in with them on a deeper level than just the internet questionnaire, but then to touch base with them face to face, like, hey, I noticed that you had mentioned that you were stressed. Let's talk about it. Sometimes just that extra checking in helped. And then if something still wasn't right and they gave them that support, hey, would you be interested in seeing the mental health provider here at school? Then I was available for that. But to give those teachers that encouragement, like, hey, try face-to-face checking in with them after you've noticed the stress. That might do more good than anything, because they know those kids probably better than I do, that I'm in the building, but I may or may not have a relationship. So that's important, is just building that relationship and knowing your students, or even your own kiddos, if that's the case. But seeking out the school counselor, mental health provider in the community or in school. If you don't have one at your school, there's certainly some in the community, and we'll share those at the end today. If you have any concerns, or even contact the parent, that could be a first step if you're working in the schools and you notice something's just not quite right. Or if it's for yourself or your loved ones, family doctor or pediatrician can also get you in the right way. But I'm going to take you back again. Connecting with others means a whole lot of love, and just that connection can make all the difference in the world. But language does matter, right? Mental health disorders are not adjectives. And this is where I go back to, we have to be careful with the language that we use so that we're not building or increasing that stigma. And I'm just as guilty. I've been in, a mental health provider for 20 some years, and I still catch myself every once in a while as those 90s movies get back to me sometimes. And I have to think, whoa, that's not helping, that's hurting. Let me rephrase that a little bit. So as you see them on the right, you might have heard those or seen those, or in movies and whatnot, but those are the ones we want to try to avoid. Mental health disorders are not adjectives, something that we all can get better at, most certainly. So mental illness, the top of our pyramid that we talked about in the triangle today. A mental health illness is very different from mental health distress or mental health problem. A mental health illness is a disorder or medical condition that is best helped by a trained health professional providing evidence-based treatments. Mental health illnesses are a result of complex changes that arise in usual brain function as a result of interplay between person's genetics and environment. We didn't talk a lot about that, but we did mention it earlier. But mental health is a lot about the genetics and the environment in which we live in, or in which we work in. I listened to some podcasts, and one that I have listened to most recently was by Brene Brown. She's a social worker. You've probably heard of her. She has the podcast Unlocking Us. And a quote was on there, and it really resonated with me. She was talking about addictions. But I think the same could be said for just mental health and mental illnesses as well. And I'm going to say it, but this is Brene's quote. Genetics are like loading the gun while the environment pulls the trigger. Kind of resonates with me. I'm going to say it again. I want you to think about it. Genetics are like loading the gun while environment pulls the trigger. I say that, and I had some mixed feelings about it, as maybe you are resulting in that as well. But some of the things that I thought, I see it as a hopeful thing, right? We are born with our own genetics. And if we know our family history, even better, right? That self-awareness, it goes right back to that. So we know our genetics. Even if we don't know our genetics, if we know ourselves and we're building those skills to cope with things, we're going to be better off. But the environment, I've been through several resilient and traumatic or workshops on trauma. And I always think the most hopeful thing is a student or a youth needs one positive adult relationship in their life to make them kick out of that negative environment that they may be coming from. They still have the genetics, but we can still build a relationship that's positive for that youth or that person, or even ourselves, just knowing that about ourselves, right? It goes back to that self-awareness, like I mentioned, being mindful of surrounding yourself with an environment that's healthy for yourself, and noticing your body. You will notice once you become more mindful that your body will give you signals of stress and not. And that awareness is certainly something that can be helpful. But a person with mental health or mental illness will experience significant, substantial, and persistent challenges with going back to that kind of line of emotions and feelings. They may feel depressed, panic attacks, overwhelming anxiety that gets into the way of their everyday experiences of work and home. Their thinking may be delusioned or disordered thoughts, hopelessness or suicidal thoughts. Their physical might be fatigue, excessive movement if they're very anxious, having a difficult time being calm, or even that lethargic, that depression that just keeps them in bed for days. So you're looking for mental illness is more significant, substantial, and persistent challenges with these things. Their behavior may look like school refusal, withdrawal from family and friends, suicide attempts, or poor self-care. The suicide attempts is to the latter of things, obviously. But the presence of mental health or mental illness or disorder signifies that individuals need basic care from a mental health professional or just any health professional to get things started. They may need different forms of psychotherapy or even medication management. So it's best to get help as soon as you might be questioning that. If found or treated more at the start of things, definitely is helpful before more negative coping skills might get in that way. So here is some of the signs and symptoms of mental illness and suicide, as you might see. I'll just kind of let you roll through those for a little bit. Talking about killing themselves, drug or alcohol abuse, uncontrollable anger or sadness, irrational mood swings, feeling worthless or without purpose, feeling hopeless, desperate or trapped, loss of interest in things they enjoyed at one time, withdrawal from loved ones, anxiety and depression, change in sleeping and eating habits, neglecting personal hygiene and care, self-injury or reckless behavior, communicating unusual thoughts, giving away prized possessions. If you see some of those things, it's best to say something and just check in for sure and move through some of those things that will be coming up in just a minute. So just to separate anxiety and depression a little bit, those are probably the most common disorders. Symptoms can include for anxiety, difficulty controlling worry, restlessness or feeling tense, getting tired easily, difficulty concentrating or have the mind go blank, easily angered, sleeping problems, and physical aches and pains. For depression, symptoms can include constant sad or empty mood, hopelessness, pessimism, irritability, guilt, worthlessness, helplessness, decreased energy, difficulty concentrating, not wanting to do anything, go anywhere or see anyone, difficult time concentrating or remembering, sleeping or eating issues, physical aches and pains, headaches, cramps, digestive problems, right? And then thoughts of suicide, which brings me to the warnings of suicide. The behaviors are listed below. They may be signs that someone is thinking about suicide, talking about it, wanting to die, great guilt or shame, being a burden to others. They're feeling maybe empty or hopeless, trapped, having no reason to live, extremely sad or more anxious, agitated or full of rage, unbearable emotional or physical pain, changing in their behavior, right? Knowing what's normal for them and what might be really a big change for them, making a plan or researching ways to die, withdrawing from friends or saying goodbye, giving away important items, making a will, taking dangerous risks such as driving extremely fast, displaying extreme mood swings, eating or sleeping more or less, use drugs or alcohol more often. If there are warning signs that do apply to someone you know, it's best to get help as soon as possible. And especially if their behavior is new or has increased recently. On there is some national lifelines. Obviously, if you're right there in front of them, get them to if they're at school, right to the mental health provider or the school counselor or even a secretary. Many times they're aware of what next steps need to happen. Or if you're in a situation that is difficult, 911 is an option, but keeping them safe is key. Don't leave them alone. A professional will do a safety check and a suicidal checklist or evaluation. And so just kind of a quick version of suicide, but it's an important thing to remember and to certainly know today. So getting to be a little more hopeful, recovery. What helps people with mental health or mental illness get and stay better? There is hope and it can happen. Okay. I've seen it lots of times over and over. And it's a wonderful thing, which keeps me going in this field and this profession. But mutual support, self-help groups, when people feel connected to someone else, they do really well. Social opportunities, school, church groups, drop-in gyms and centers, volunteer work, participating in community life, giving them a reason to be there, to feel that connection. Positive relationships, accepted and being accepted, family and friends, and communicating with them in positive ways. Meaningful day activities, being able to work and go to school. Medication, sticking with a treatment plan and working with doctors for the best medications with the fewest side effects. This gets really frustrating, I know, because every person is so different and metabolizes medication differently. I'm no doctor, I don't give medications, but I know it can be frustrating. And it takes a lot of time of trying different things with your doctor. Spirituality, involvement of a faith community or individual spiritual practice. I know some of you had that in the chat when we were talking about that wellness or coping skills. Inner healing capacity and inner peace, sense of meaning and purpose, even in suffering. I think of that right there, the inner healing capacity and inner peace, sense of meaning and purpose, even in suffering, right there, that tells me resilience. And when someone can show or tell you about that piece right there, they have built resilience. And that is a great sign for getting better and feeling better. Moving down then, personal growth and development, finding new hobbies, self-education, feeling like they're taking control of one's life, exercise, personal goal setting, and self-awareness. I've said it 100 times today. I apologize, but being aware of your own self and being cognizant of that is so important in living your best optimal healthy life. Self-monitoring, recognizing when you do need to seek help, or recognizing one's accomplishments and accepting and or learning from one's failures. I know somebody said just the high expectations on kids these days. I think it's important to just normalize sometimes, like, hey, you're going to make some really bad choices. Your brain has not quite developed yet, the power of yet, right? And so we can learn from these failures. It doesn't make you who you are. And I think sometimes we're not as great at letting kids know that as maybe we should be, is to say, poor choice doesn't make you who you are. We can move on from here. What did you learn from this? And move forward, certainly. But build resilience by connecting with others and mindfully caring for mental health and wellness. The more you know, the more you grow. I liked this, this picture because it really kind of connected it all for me. You have your connecting with others is so good for your care, but taking care of your mind and those, your brain changes so quickly in adolescence, and it doesn't have to end there. The more we keep our intellectual brain changing, our brain is able to change so that, like I said, that's a whole nother topic that can have its own training, but the brain wellness is really something. But we can definitely change our brains into thinking clearly and resolve some of those mental health issues that come up. So the next is resources. Get the help when you need it and get it early. Here's some of our own Nebraska lines here, state and national. And I believe Amber has a few, and we'll put those in the chat box. There they are. Okay.
We'll try to put it in the chat. If not, we will share these out as a resource too. So it's some of those ones that Brandy had put together, just help finding treatment, some helplines, some different psychiatric hospitals across the state, and then some numbers for the adult and youth crisis response lines. And then I also have the logo for our Office of Coordinated Student Support Services at the department. And then that is our website. So we have some resources there as well. And like I said, that is where we will house this training in this resource list once we get the recording.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to give some time for questions, and I can certainly try to answer them as best as I can. I want to thank you again for the opportunity and sharing your lunchtime with me today. I'm just thrilled that we have people that are interested in learning more about mental health. It certainly has been something on my mind for many years, and it's just great to see that the Department of Education and the Health and Human Services are working together to make that a priority for our kids and for our youth and just our state in general. So thank you for the opportunity today.
There are no questions in the chat, but if anybody has a question that you either want to type in the chat that we can read out, or you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, we have about 7 minutes left.
I'm just wondering if you folks know the status of one of the bills that came before the Nebraska legislature maybe last year about supporting mental health practitioners or mental health experts through the ESU system. Do you have any idea if that's going forward, or has any work been done in that area to sort of facilitate or support that work?
I was monitoring that bill for a while and haven't checked on it, so I'm not sure if it passed or not, but I know it was going to allow for some more training to be done, and so that is something I definitely need to check on. So sorry, I don't have an answer for you.
I guess I don't really either, so I apologize.
That's all right. I just, when I heard that, though, I thought, okay, they're getting it. They're understanding that this is certainly an issue that schools are dealing with, and that they need that resource. And I was so disheartened to see that it didn't happen. So I'm hoping that in some way, I don't know who it needs to hear it, but it would be so fantastic for our students and our school districts if we were able to have that kind of support coming through the educational service units, because in those rural areas, it is so very difficult to find a mental health practitioner if they're not associated with an ESU.
Thank you, Trudy. I appreciate you bringing up that topic, because that was kind of where my starting point was. I did work for an ESU just prior to this, and then was hired by a school, and I too seen that need, and I am a huge advocate, and I think my school here would also say it's definitely been a positive thing for our community and our school. And I'm not tooting my own horn. It's just coming off the year that we did and seeing what kind of stressors that is. And that was something I was working on years before that pandemic happened, was to get, more information through the ESUs and gaining mental health practitioners into that school setting. But yeah, I agree with you 110%, and I will advocate forever and ever to follow that as well. So thanks for bringing that up. I agree. We definitely need to see more of that.
Yeah, I just saw the good work that came from that, and it's not to say that our guidance counselors don't have that as well. But in the small rural schools, they're dealing with so many other issues. It's just good to have that resource. So,
yes, I agree. Thank you.
I am going to launch the poll for everyone. If you could please complete that, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. But we do have a couple more minutes if anybody else has a question or a comment. Well, thank you everyone that is completing the poll. Like I said, we appreciate that. And if there's nothing else, Brandy, thank you so much for your sharing your wonderful wisdom today. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for taking your time over your lunch to spend with us today and hopefully learn a little bit. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.